Welcome back, everybody, to today's A to Z of property strategies with the fabulous, fantastic, Fantasia David DJ Clouter.
Thank you, sir. The wonderful Mr. Incomparable Andrew Roberts.
Well, thank you, David. I hope you've all had a fantastic week since the last time we were with you sharing property strategies. We wrapped up with refurb shortcuts, and today, well, it feels like we should do something about rent, because property strategies are all about rent, David.
Absolutely so.
Aren't
And
they?
today we have very firmly landed on our R's. And the
Ooh.
R, ouch.
Oh, you said ours.
Gotcha. The R we're going to kick off with is rent reinvestment, which is basically, to summarise that in one sentence, don't spend the rent, it belongs to the house, to the property.
So basically, pay down the mortgage faster.
That's correct.
Reducing the term from, say, a 25-year mortgage to 7 as can be done and as I've done, which is a good thing. Because
Absolutely.
all of a sudden you've just slashed your costs. But it's a bad thing as well, because things like interest, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, are no longer a business expense. It's 100% of your capital. You're not necessarily gearing up your portfolio in a way that enables you to have 2, 3, 4 properties with that money. But what are the pros, David, do you see? I mean, net present value terms, you'd be worse off as well. So what are the pros?
Well, back in when I started, many times you were still in short trousers at school, and interest rates were in double digits, and so that really was a bit of a bummer. And so therefore, paying one of those off quickly was quite a good idea, because a huge proportion of your rent was just servicing interest, and those in those times the interest only self-cert mortgage was ruling the thing, and they were 100%. And it was the thing where, me with my day job as a cleaner, the janitor, Dave the janitor would go into the broker. Broker would say, how much do you earn, Dave the janitor? I'd say 150 grand. He'd write it in the box. And as long as basically I had a phone number at home or something, I don't think they even checked the electoral register, out would come the money. So in those heady days, I used to try and always attack the mortgages, and I have paid them down, maybe not in 7 years, but I paid them down in less than half the term of the mortgage. One of my favourite tricks back then was to double what I was paying, to find out what it was and double it. And then in particular, as the interest rates started really plummeting from, 16% down to 8 or something. And that was a result back then. You mollycoddled people with your 2% mortgages. So I'd never catch on. But so back in those days, I would just keep paying a flat amount. I'd ring the bank and I'd say, look, I'd like to overpay. Is it okay? And most of them were cool about that. And it didn't prejudice it when I came to getting more mortgages, because I'd paid off the last one. They said, oh, well, he's a good bet. He's a decent sort. And so with those astonishingly and criminally insane high interest rates, there was a great deal of incentive to pay them back early. With your 1.75%, perhaps less so. But, rates could, perhaps not in the short term, but at some point they could creep up again, and then you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, I remember those days of 15.9%. It was a lot of money going out every month. A lot of money. So, no, good strategy to pursue in the right part of the economic cycle.
And, of course, just before we leave this one, if you're reinvesting the rent, you're not necessarily paying down the mortgages. You might be saving up for the next deposit.
Good point.
So, and when you go, as soon as you get north of Watford or something, where the capital gains can't be guaranteed anymore, you want a way in which you can, with these much higher yielding properties, increase your equity in your business. And the two ways to do that are the two that we just mentioned: to either pay down some of the borrowing or buy more stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely, and well, I think that was what I was suggesting earlier. Is perhaps reinvest in another property rather than paying down the mortgage.
Yeah, or a combination of both.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Make it sweat. I mean, a cracking way of making it sweat is have an offset mortgage. So as the money comes into your account, it offsets against the mortgage. Phenomenal way, phenomenal product,
Yes.
phenomenal
Do
product.
they still do those? My goodness, they were all the rage when I was a kid.
Yeah, no, they are brilliant. I have them. I've had them, and I will always endorse them because you've got idle money that could be earning 1% interest versus money that you've taken out that paying 5% on, for argument's sake. I have to pay tax on the 1%, so I'm only actually getting, say, 0.8%, which means I get less and I don't get tax relief at a higher rate on the other side. Anyway, let's move on.
Before we do, one quick thing, because I remember you telling me that once, but I've forgotten the precise detail, which is whether it's better to pay your mortgage at the beginning of the month or the end or the middle. And I remember there was a reason, but I can't for the life of me remember what it was.
Yeah, no. What that is, just as a reminder for everybody, a bit of revision for David as well, is if you are on a daily interest rate with your mortgage lender, and most mortgage lenders now have moved to daily interest rate products, paying it on the 1st of the month opposed to the 30th of the month, you save yourself 30 days worth of interest. So always try and get your payment at the start of the month or as early in the month as you can, that your cash flow and pay slips, earnings from employment, self-employment permit you to. And if you're able to, obviously pay down overpayments, because if you're overpaying, you always reduce that interest payment as well for next month and the month after. And it's a good feeling to see the balances coming down.
Okay, continuing with the letter R, rent to own. And there's a number of ways that that could work out. I mean, one could be that the simplest way, I suppose, is if you're the good old-fashioned tenant buyer. And a lot of property investors quite like that because the property investor is making his or her money on the margin. But the tenant buyer, because it's ultimately going to be their property,
Yep.
they look after it like it's their own. So you're never, ever bothered by it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I've helped a couple of people do rent to own, and one of them was selling a property, the other one was wanting to buy, and there were two different properties, two different clients that I gave some coaching to. The one who was selling, it was a house that was valued at around 495,000. The agent had said, pop it on the market at that and accept offers around 450. It had been on the market 9 months and he wasn't getting any offers. So I said to him, why don't you look for somebody who wants to buy it but can't afford to buy it at the moment because the bank won't give them a mortgage? And he said, how's that work? So very simplistically, what we did is we put together a structure, and I educated him where to go and look for this person and what to say. And literally, he went out on the Friday night and started advertising that he was looking for somebody for his house. On the Sunday morning, somebody knocked on his front door. The Monday, they'd agreed the heads of terms, and within around 14 days, I think it was, they moved in and he moved out. So it can be done, and it's very fast. It's a case of knowing how to do all of that paperwork and process, which is too much for this short video. But in the same meeting I was sat in advising this gentleman, the other person in the meeting had been renting their house for the last 3.5 years. They didn't want to move and their landlord wanted to sell. So they said, would that work for me? And I helped them to structure that particular transaction by turning it the opposite way round so that he could do a rent to buy. So the one was a rent to sell, the other was a rent to buy. And they even had the benefit of the seller gifting them the deposit and support from the next door neighbour as well, in order that they could complete this transaction. So it's a great little strategy. I think there might be a video on our channel of a Great Property Meet live where one of the gentlemen involved, actually stood up and talked through the case study and shared it with the audience, so that the audience could actually go and apply it and use it in their business. So, but the key thing with both of them, you can structure the transaction so that you can win. Now, the gentleman who'd been selling his house for 500,000, 495 basically, and the agent had said take an offer of 550, actually achieved a sale price of 525 under this route, and therefore was £75,000 better off, cash in his pocket. You can't get better than that.
Absolutely.
And he also didn't have to spend any money, and in the first week of the people moving in, they upgraded the house, they stuck electronic gates on, they put a new driveway down, they were treating it like their own home. So for me, it's a strategy where you can actually shift the ownership and the liability.
Fantastic. It's a brilliant idea. Now, if at all possible, if we're able to put in the links below, the link to the video that had it at the meet, and if we can't find it, heck, we could do a whole episode on this, couldn't we, in future, as the professors of property.
Absolutely. Well, I shall have to do an interview with the gentleman if I can't find that video. We've got a lot of Great Property Meet lives, so if you look up here, you'll see a link to the Great Property Meet lives. If I can't find that specific one, we'll do an interview with that gentleman for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Now, two rent strategies now that are kind of heavily promoted, or possibly less so at the moment now that we've been through a pandemic. But rent-to-rent HMO is one of them. And the theory behind this, and the good guys who are doing this are still doing this. It's just the ones who learnt it for a week, and as we were talking about in the last episode about property sharks. Just those guys have fallen by the wayside, but the guys who are still doing it today, we can be sure they're the good ones. And in this one, you take a house that is for rent. You guarantee the rent in some way to the owner. And then you would sign, I guess, a management agreement to make it all legal and above board with that owner. And then once you've done that, you are letting out the individual rooms, and there is a difference between what you are paying the owner and what you are collecting from the HMO tenants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting strategy, because I sort of look at it and say to myself, well, if the owner is struggling to rent this and the owner's not making money off it, are you moving a monkey off their back onto your back? There I pose a question. It does work. I know a lot of people who are doing this very, very successfully and making very good money out of it. And to be honest, I've got one of my businesses that does this on a contract basis. It's not rent to HMO, it's rent, it's not even rent to serviced accommodation, it's rent to something else. But that's a secret strategy of mine. So we keep that one quiet.
Yeah,
because we make money off that one.
The rent to something else strategy, we're not going to tell anybody about that one. You can Google it instead. Now,
well, when you find a niche in a market that's profitable, you keep the niche.
Absolutely, you do. In 20 years' time, when we've moved on, we'll come back and do a video about that.
Absolutely.
I'll be in my Zimmer frame by then.
And that'll be property strategy number 260, won't it?
I would think so, at the very least. At the very least. So, our next strategy today is very similar to the last one, and the introduction is a brief one. It's rent-to-rent serviced accommodation. And the advantage of this over rent-to-rent HMO is that you haven't got to do, with rent-to-rent HMO, you've got to do all this work to make it compliant. Much less so rent-to-rent service, because it's not somebody's home, so it's not covered by a lot of the same regulations. They're just fly-by-nighters. They're in today, out tomorrow, and all you've got to do basically is change the linen. So there's less compliance, but more linen changing. To summarise that one.
And also more customer care, because I say this lightly and also slightly flippantly. I read a lot of landlord forums, shall we say, and landlord posts on Facebook groups and the like, and everything tends to be griping about the customer who's entered a long-term rental agreement with them. Now, these are people who come and go. They might be there 1 to 3 nights, and they expect customer service. So you have to be very, very customer service focused in order to do this one successfully. And I know a lot of people who are doing this very successfully because they're very customer focused and very empathetic. But you're only as good as your last customer and the last customer review in this strategy, aren't you?
That's very true. That's very true. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. At the moment, obviously, at the time of recording, we're in a sort of pandemical situation as well. So occupancy on these kind of things would be less than has normally been the case. But again, there are people in my network who are continuing to do this by making it a bit more niche, and by specifically targeting maybe a set key workers, this kind of thing, and putting them into there rather than casual, traveling umbrella salespeople.
Well, I was going to say, I was about to say similar, that this year there's been the development of a new property strategy, rent to key worker, which I know so many people in the service sector who basically latched onto that very quickly because all of a sudden all their bookings were cancelled and they were voided, and they're paying out the money to the landlord and they got no money coming in the front door. Those who were fortunate enough to have accommodation close to, shall we say, council offices, hospitals, fire stations, key worker locations have managed to fill their gaps.
And they've also saved the fee that they would have been paying to Airbnb and Booking.com and all this kind of thing. So they've hugely increased their margins.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But shall we put that one down as a strategy, rent to key worker?
I think we definitely should. So we've got 251 now, moving towards that target of 260.
There we go. We're on the up.
Absolutely, and times change, don't they? I reckon this series of ours, I hope that everybody who's watching has been enjoying these, but I reckon it's going to be a bit like the old story, which I don't know is an urban legend or not, but this story concerning the Forth Bridge in Scotland, where I don't know if you've heard this, but as the saying goes, there's such a lot of, and I believe this is one of those old Victorian bridges, probably Brunel or somebody built it, I don't know, so don't hold me to that one. But the idea is that this bridge is such a magnificent piece of Victorian ironmongery, would you say, of Victorian engineering, that clearly it has to be painted to stop it going rusty. And the fellow whose job it is to paint it, or possibly more than one, and I'm sure some ladies get involved as well, the job is so enormous that even working at 110%, by the time they've gone from one side of the River Forth to the other, painting this bridge diligently with all the anti-rust paint, and it's of the finest type and it lasts for years, it is time to go back to the other side and start again. And that reminds me of, do you remember Fred Dibner?
I do. He was on TV last night.
I was watching a video of him on YouTube last night, so by complete coincidence.
That's it.
And demolishing some chimney from the top, taking it down a little bit at a time. And over 6 months. So similar kind of thing there.
Yeah, no, a great northern chap, Mr. Fred Dibner.
It was terrific, and all props to whoever in that TV company discovered that guy and turned him into a national treasure, because it was very deserved.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a boys' thing, isn't it, really? We like to see things built, how they work, and then blown up.
Oh, yeah. But in this one
Especially
I
with
saw...
old car tyres, you wouldn't get that these days, would you?
Yeah, would not. The one I saw, which might be different to the one that was on the telly then, was one where there was this enormous chimney which was right next to a factory. And so he was climbing up it without any visible harness or safety equipment, all the way up to the top of this chimney, over the space of 6 months, with his little claw hammer, push, 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 drop the brick down, push, 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 drop the mountain, and they had the poor fella at the bottom who had to collect them all up. And he said he was going at the rate of 1 metre a day.
Tough job.
Indeed.
Job.
But as they say,
But
somebody's
got to do it.
Touché. Well, we've come up to time again, haven't we?
I think we have. It's been a phenomenal day of rent to rents and rent to essays and reinvestments. We've also had our rent to buys.
Yeah, and we blew the lid off your
Fred Dibner session and rent to key worker.
That was right. That was going to be secret earlier. We were going to keep that one secret. Now we've blurted it out. Rent to key worker.
Absolutely. Sorry, David. I know that was your new strategy. Well, on that note, I better zip up, say goodbye. So it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. And back to you.
Well, thank you very much. Stay tuned, everybody. Hit the subscribe. David loves it when you whack that like button because it makes him so happy. And he also loves it when you share it with your friends and put a nice comment in about just how good we are. And if you're around on a Tuesday night, don't forget Cam FM. What's the frequency, David? Or is it camfm.co.uk? You can pick it up online.
camfm.co.uk. But if you live near me in Cambridge, it's 97.2.
97.2 Cam FM. And we're all practicing our radio DJ voice. So thank you very much, and goodbye from us both.